Welcome to this special episode of the Passionate Few podcast. Today we have a very special episode as it's our round 3 with none other than Tom Bilyeu. Known as the founder of Quest Nutrition, Tom built a billion-dollar company, exited, and has now built Impact Theory, which has reached tens of millions of people around the world, has interviewed hundreds of guests, and in this interview we get into the psychology of not only the mindset that it took to have his billion-dollar success, but also what he's learned from hundreds of top achievers, from NFTs to crypto to business to mindset to athletes and everything in between, and how he's deduced that wisdom to help people around the world take action on their life, their business, and their dreams to maximize their potential. So, no further ado, I want to encourage you guys to sit back, relax, and enjoy this incredible interview. The billion-dollar man himself, the king of Impact Theory, Tom Bilyeu. Enjoy. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Tom. Round 3.
Thanks for having me, man. It's exciting to be back.
Absolutely, man. I love the new spot. You got the new logo here. It's been epic. And thank you so much for allowing us to do this here in your beautiful home, man. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. It is much more fun to do these in person.
Yes.
So I'm excited.
Yes, sir. And kind of what I wanted to delve into today is, you know, obviously a lot of people know your story. They know you've done with Impact Theory. They obviously knew you built a company to $1 billion valuation, exited. So you've kind of seen the tip of success that a lot of people aim for, aspire for. And being on this side of the fence, I'm curious, my first question is, number one, what is the most shocking thing about being on this side of the fence of quote unquote success that you didn't anticipate or expect when you were sort of younger, aspiring for it?
You have to really go back for it to get to the surprising part, because what I learned long before I actually became successful was that success wasn't going to change my insecurities. And I think most people go into it thinking that success is going to eradicate their insecurities. They look at somebody that's successful with this admiration. And they think, when I'm that successful, I will look at myself with that admiration. And it doesn't work like that. So, and what's super interesting, it's not surprising at this point. This would have surprised me in my 20s. But like I said, thankfully I learned these lessons when I was still struggling, is that, you know, your insecurities are going to go with you wherever you go. And the name of the game is really about skill set, and skill set in a few different ways. Skill set in, there are things that I want to accomplish in this world and I must get good at them. But then there's also skill set in managing my own mind. And that is the real juice. So you gave me that poster, Outwork Everyone. And when I was writing a message on it, it's like, to outwork everyone, there is a certain thing that must be true in your mind, which is you have to know that all you have is this moment. And so success is not some thing in the future where you will cross a finish line and feel forever the way you've always wanted to feel, which is what people think. Success will feel exactly like this moment. Whatever your life is right now. If it's a mess, I could give you $1 billion and it would still be a mess. And so understanding the name of the game is really to optimize the way that you respond to your environment, the way you respond to your challenges, the way you respond to difficulties. That's it. Because, and look, there's a whole book written on this called The Power of Now. I think it's Eckhart Tolle. And it's a whole book trying to get you to understand one simple idea, that your brain processes stimuli in a certain way. And it doesn't matter the amplitude of that stimulus. So when things are going well for you, you already know what that looks like. When things are going badly for you, you already know what that looks like. So now if I add a lot of commas and zeros, nothing changes, because your brain, the way that you have optimized it, the way that you let it run riot or not run riot, all of that's defined. And so changing the external stimulus will not change your life. Changing the internal reaction will change your life, regardless of the outside stimulus.
Now that was an evolutionary lesson you learned, right? You learned it in bits and pieces as you sort of grew. Take me back, because I know before you had the company that now would be $1 billion valuation and exit, which would be Quest. Prior to that, you had another company with some partners that was probably doing a couple $1 million, right? But it wasn't so fulfilling. And I know you mentioned that a lot and referenced that time period where you kind of felt lost, successful but unfulfilled. Take me back to what you learned from that, because I think there's a lot of people who are in that boat, whether it's a multi-million-dollar company or they're building it or whatever it is. Looking back, where was your North Star at the time, and what did you learn from that? Because now obviously you're doing something much more fulfilling, a much longer game. But take me back to that, just so people can have context, because they might be in that situation right now, successful but not fulfilled, and not knowing what they're chasing, what their North Star is.
Yeah, my North Star was money. And so I was just showing up every day trying to get rich. And that was the thing that had, you were saying, what surprises you now looking back? Because I learned that lesson there, which is that the success isn't guaranteed, but the struggle is. And so if you're just chasing money, and money is just meant to be a means to something else, it's really the something else that you need to optimize your life around. So because I can't guarantee that you will ever get the money, and even if you get the money, I can't guarantee that the thing you want to do with the money will actually work. So you've got two big who the hell knows between where you are and where you want to be. And then, punchline of punchlines, what I was just saying is that even when you get to that thing, it's going to be about your mental optimization game and not the external stimuli. It's how many billionaires have to commit suicide before people realize, oh, I guess that's not going to solve my issues, which really ultimately are about brain chemistry. It's about, are you good at managing how you feel? And recognizing that it is a game of management, that's really the key. So when I was there and money was just the goal, that was my North Star, I was chasing that. I wasn't fulfilled, because fulfillment is a formula. And the formula is predicated on basically natural selection. So you've got millions of years of evolution that wanted to ensure that you lived long enough to have kids that have kids. And of course, there's massive amounts of complexity hiding in that very simple statement about sexual desire and pursuit, and where are we in the hierarchy, and so that we can attract a mate, and there's a whole lot of things going on in there. But at like a really sort of oversimplified level, it's my brain is trying to keep me alive long enough to have kids that have kids. Okay, so what does that look like? How do I begin to think and act? And what nature really needs to ensure that you do is work really hard, because on the plains of the savannah, you had to work hard to do this. So working hard needed to have a reward, and failing to work hard needed to have a punishment from a natural perspective, meaning that evolution is going to create mental mechanisms where you feel good when you're working hard and you feel bad when you're not. And so I think that all of us have that innate imperative lodged in our brain, which is why when people aren't working hard, they're going to struggle emotionally. Now, you want to work not just hard, but you want to work hard towards a set of skills that matter to you. So pick a goal that's both exciting, meaning just when you think about doing that thing, it's just fun, it's exciting. The act of doing it is something that you find pleasurable, regardless of what the outside world thinks, regardless of success, that you could have fun losing at that thing.
And process versus outcome. Yeah. Like you enjoy the process of it more than the outcome needing to make you happy while doing it.
100%, because the outcome will never last. There are no finish lines in life other than death. So, and then the other part is, because we're a social creature, you want to make sure that you're working hard towards a goal that's exciting to you, but it's also honorable. And I just define honorable as something that elevates not only yourself, but other people. So, and again, that's just acknowledging what nature has ensured you feel a compulsion to do. So if you're contributing meaningfully to the group, you're going to feel good about yourself. If you're not contributing meaningfully to the group, then you won't. And so when I was just chasing money, it was, in the beginning, I could contextualize it as, I'm fighting for my family. And there is a lot of juice behind that. But ultimately, it just felt like, oh man, I don't know. Like, this is such a big question mark. Not that I don't know about my family. It's such a big question mark as to whether or not I'm ever going to get it. So wouldn't it be wiser to have something that worked double duty? That as I chase it and hope that I'm really going to take care of my family with the money, but that I don't need to get the money in order to have added value to the world, to my family, to feel good in the chase. And so when you add that second layer of, I want to do something that even in the failure, I can add value to people. And so that becomes a far more fulfilling game, because again, I cannot promise you will get the success, but I can promise it will be hard. So now optimize for struggling well. And that was the big breakthrough, was, okay, I'm chasing money, I'm just miserable. I tell my wife, don't ask me about my day. I don't want to talk about it. It's so stressful.
Even though it's profitable and it's working and all that, it's still internally not feeling good.
It's just so much work. And you're getting kicked in the face over and over and over. And I don't know if this has been your experience in business, but mine is that you're eating knuckle sandwiches all the time. Like, it is literally hilarious how in a single day, I will go from elated and things are working and this is amazing. And then like, oh my God, there's a fire to be put out here. Somebody's angry over there. It's like, it's just a lot. And so when you know, one, be very thoughtful about how you contextualize a moment, right? So we were talking about this and I said, look, it's dangerous for me because I can walk by it and not even notice it. Whereas, 7 years ago, the idea of like being able to have a wall with my logo, I was just like such a cool fantasy.
Right.
And then it happens, hedonic adaptation happens, you get used to it and you don't even see it anymore. So you have to be really thoughtful about, okay, this thing is happening or I'm pursuing this, I'm doing this and I'm gonna enjoy it. So on the days where it's this huge amplitude of joy, when it's joyful, I'm like, this too shall pass, but I'm going to enjoy it. And when it's, knuckle sandwich time, I'm like, this too shall pass, and I'm going to learn from it. And so you go on these flows, but it really does become about getting good at the emotional management of that kind of thing. And that's a really hard game. But when I think about like the game we should all play in life, it's Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
I love that book.
I mean, anybody that I cannot fathom that somebody has ever read that book and not walked away going like, this is transformational. Because when somebody, so for those that don't know, he was in a concentration camp and he comes out saying that even in that situation, you can control your mental framing of what's happening. And based on how well you control your mental framing will determine, in that case, he said you could literally predict when somebody would die, that mental framing would break, they would no longer understand why they were suffering this much, and then that would just be it.
Right.
Whereas when they knew why they were doing what they were doing, so they had a goal that was, exciting and honorable, then it was like, okay, I can get through this. I can get through anything. And that to me is this incredibly powerful reminder. If you're reaching for truly outsized success, you really have to control your emotional state because there's a lot at stake. And when there's a lot at stake, then, the different constituents that you have, you can never know where the next problem is going to come from. And so the actual solving of the problems has to be part of the juice.
I love that you say that. And it's something that I think a lot of people, particularly nowadays, A, talk about, but B, struggle with because, especially with the advent of social and like interview shows, awesome ones like Impact Theory, which I'm honored to say I got to be on set day one. I don't know if you remember that, like before it even launched. It was exciting to see like how amazing you guys blew it up to. But like what happens is a lot of people get saturated and inundated with all these ideas, right? One entrepreneur says hustle 24/7. Another says you need 10 hours of sleep. Another one's like you need 4, right? There's so many stimuli, do this, don't do this, right? So many different things that I see a common pattern happen to myself as well, where you get bombarded with all these different things you could do and mix of like, do I pursue skills? Do I pursue passions? Do I pursue purpose, right? And there's this big soup pot of all these different opinions. What advice do you have for people out there, men and women around the world, trying to navigate that and find practical, like, okay, how do I go with my income in my life, whether I have a job I'm in or a business I'm trying to start or whatever it is, how do they know when to navigate and tune out the noise when there's just so much of that inundating them? I know it's an open-ended question, but what have you seen work in terms of tuning out the noise and pursuing what's real versus what's the next shiny object?
Interesting. I don't know that it's noise versus real.
Sure.
And what's really interesting is that depending on where you're at in your career, some of the noise, let's say, are people that are not happy with what you're doing. Now, the great news is they will tend to throw things at you that are real. And those will hit and they will hurt. And in that moment, if you use the psychological immune system to dodge, to duck and weave, and to, that's not my fault, it's not my problem, they're wrong, they're idiots, whatever, you avoid to some extent some of the initial sting, but you don't learn the lesson. And so I'll come back to that, to your initial point about, okay, there's just a lot of conflicting advice. And so how do you navigate conflicting advice? The real key is you have to put it to use. You have to think of everything as an experimentation. So it's what I call the physics of progress, which is basically just the scientific method recontextualized for business or life, however you want to think about it. So one, it starts with your goal. And this is where most people cannot get to first principles thinking for two reasons. One, they don't have clarity of goal. And two, they're thinking about things instead of the nature of things. So don't think about business. Don't go get business advice. Figure out what is your business. What's its purpose, right? So at a really simplistic level, you could say that a business is selling something for a price that is profitable, but the person buying would rather have that thing than the amount of money that you charge for it. You say that. You could say that business is ultimately psychology. It's creating something that people desire more than they desire the money. But when you get down to that level, it's really both of those things. And now you start to be able to think from first principles. So as you're marketing, you think, oh, my job here is to create desire in people so that they want this thing more than they want the product. When you're thinking about it from an operations perspective, you're thinking about, I have to produce this thing for less money than I can sell it. And so now you're oh, okay, cool. Now I know what operations is. Now I know what marketing is. And you really begin to get into the game of realizing that this is a game of humans, and humans are not purely rational beings. And so the more you get into the underworkings of that, the better off you are. Now, to apply that to yourself, you have to take a first principles look at, why am I confused? Now, 99 times out of 100, the answer to why am I confused, why does it feel like noise, I don't know who to listen to, is because you don't understand the nature of progress itself. So you're trying to make progress, you know that, you have a vision, a goal, you want to get somewhere other than where you are now, but you don't understand the nature of progress. The nature of progress is what it is, based on the way the human mind works, based on the fact that the second law of thermodynamics is correct, and that in a closed system, the only way to overcome chaos is to inject energy, right? So it's like things move towards chaos. That's just the natural state of things. So, okay, if those things are true, then I need to have a freakish amount of clarity so I know exactly where it is that I'm trying to go. Once I know where I'm trying to go, then I'm going to come up with my best guess of how to get there. So that's my hypothesis. So I know that I'm going to have to iterate. So here's my goal. I need to figure out what is the obstacle that stands between where I'm at and where I want to go. So what is that agent of chaos, right? The entropy that I will run into. Why, if I just keep doing what I'm doing today, why won't I automatically get to my goal? That is a question people should ask, just a freakish amount, because that's going to keep you running new tests. How could I be more efficient? So, but to get back to this idea of the physics of progress, which is the nature of progress itself. I have a goal, there is an obstacle. I must come up with a guess, a hypothesis of what will most effectively get me past the obstacle and make meaningful progress towards my goal. Then my goal really needs to be specific in terms of date, how much, so that I know I want to get to this state by this date, and this state is defined with numbers. And anything that can be turned into math should be turned into math. So I'm looking at this, I now have this freakish degree of clarity, when, how much, what, all of it's locked up. I have my best guess as to what the obstacle is and what I need to do to get around it. And then once I have that hypothesis, I need to run that test. So your hypothesis is, if I did this thing, I would get this outcome and it would move me closer. Cool, go pull that lever. Now you pull that lever and you have to assess. I know what metrics I'm aiming at. Did I make meaningful progress towards those metrics? If I did not, then I need to figure out why, reformulate my hypothesis, and run the next test. And then you literally just do that over and over. Now, because that's the nature of progress, that iterative loop. Now, because most people hit a gazillion emotional snags as they go through this, they derail themselves. They don't listen to the truth of their failure. They don't want to own it because it sucks. Every time, Omar, that I realize that I have screwed up, that I'm wrong, it sucks. I don't enjoy it. But the thing that keeps me going is recognizing that that is the nature of progress itself. And that if I fail to look at what I can control that I could do differently next time, I'm either going to repeat the mistake or I'm going to quit. Now, the bad news about success is it's a game of attrition. And the really bad news is that to move forward, you must be willing to fail a lot. Because failure is the most information-rich data stream that exists, because it hurts and you actually tried something. So you tried something, there's real-world results, those results hurt. That pain triggers the areas of the brain that have to do with memory and focus. So you really look at that thing, right? This is, again, this is nature saying, hey, because there's so much information in this failure, I want to make sure that we do the things that get you to learn from that, so that the next time it isn't a close call with the tiger, right? That either you can really keep distance, you're not putting yourself in that kind of dangerous situation again. And then obviously the people that really got themselves in trouble just got eaten, and so they're all wiped out. And so that becomes this loop. But every time you fail, you get this aversion response where you don't want to do this again. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to face your inadequacies.
Right.
And it's really rough. And then it's magnified 1,000-fold by social media. Because now 1,000 people are telling you that you're a fucking moron. So it is this
and you
really
have a team and money and time and energy and
you magnify that 1,000,000-fold because now there's a lot at stake for a lot of different people. And so most people, they just can't keep iterating. And so it is the game. And there's, as far as I can tell, and look, I'm constantly updating my mental models, but as far as I can tell, that's the ground floor. That really is the physics of progress. And if you can't figure out that when I just failed and I failed publicly and people are making fun of me, in that moment, can I just stay centered or get centered again? Because of course you're going to get knocked off. Can I recenter myself very quickly and focus on what I need to do? And once the do is back to hypothesis, back to execution. And if you can stay in that loop, what do I need to do? What's the next thing to try? Then on a long enough timeline, you can win. But most people, they just stop, man. It's just too much. It's not fun. And by the way, there is a ready-made off-ramp because I don't know how many people should listen to me. I don't know how many people should live the kind of life that I'm trying to live, where I'm trying to have outsized success. I'm trying to build something massive. For the right person, I think that I actually have the right tools. Like these have served me incredibly well in my life. I have the receipts to show that it works, but I also have the receipts to show emotionally it's brutal. And if you don't know how to rebalance yourself, it's not a winning proposition. So focusing on that, the mental game of like fulfillment matters, fulfillment's important, joy is a metric, optimize your life for joy. And then you've got to play the game on a really long timeline. So you have to discount anybody that says, you know, you're a moron for this failure. It's like, that doesn't ring true to me for the following reason. Making a mistake and even doing something that is objectively stupid. Let's say that the vast majority of humanity would have seen clearly that which I missed. Okay? So let's say that that was true, and I'll qualify that and say that's what we're defining as stupid. So let's say that I actually do make a stupid mistake that most people would not have made. If in that moment I give up, I'm out of the game. If in that moment I can recenter, learn my lesson, and keep going, then I put myself in an elite class, not because I can prognosticate everything accurately, but because I don't quit. And that's really been my secret, is I just don't give up.
Your willingness to continue in the scientific experiment process.
And then that knowledge that you gain stacks. And that's the part that people
compounds.
can't, they can't fathom that, of like how potent it becomes when that stacks.
Down the stretch too. I wanted to ask, what about in terms of people pursuing, because you started your first company, you made money with it. It obviously gave you some capital, and then you guys went into Quest. That was a much more meaningful endeavor. You exited. Now you're doing this. It almost seems like as you sort of escalated, quote unquote, in business, the business has got more and more meaningful, more and more purposeful. Do you think, and this is a huge question, I think for a lot of people, do you think it's important for people to sort of, and I may not word this correctly, but earn the right to pursue their passions or purposes in the context of a lot of people might be making arbitrary number, but 40, 50, pursuing maybe 100,000 a year, somewhere in that ballpark, but they want to make millions and impact millions of people. If they're in that process, do you think, do you see a culture of a lot of people aiming for big stuff, not wanting to stack the skills in the short term and looking at the short term money making principles versus the long term? What advice do you have for people who are sort of trying to ascend up that ladder, but trying to mesh the desire for more money with the desire for impact when they don't have the skills for it per se? Do you think people need to earn the skills, go slow, work inside of organizations and institutions that they may now have started to stack skill sets, and long term that'll serve them for the purpose or passion? Or are you of the opinion that people, if they have a vision, something inside of them, they should go at it and full on work at it and develop skills in that over the long haul? What school of thought, I know it's an open-ended question, but what school of thought do you subscribe to? What advice do you have for people who are kind of in that place?
So I want my answers to start becoming really predictable for people. So
Sure.
anybody listening closely to me knows that I'm gonna say we have to get to first principles.
Right.
So first principle starts with your goal. So what is that person's goal? Some people, it's, I'm young, I'm in a position where I'm not worried about losing money. I'm not even that worried about losing time. I just really, really want to get skills. And so then it becomes a question of, given the area that you're going into, what's the most rapid way to acquire those skills? And it may be going to the person that's living your ideal life and offering to work for them for free. It may be doing an internship. It may be working in a large company. Like, there are many ways you can get that experience. There's also, hey, you can try starting your own company. And if you've got the interest in that, a great way to find out about whether that's a good long-term play for you or not is to try it. Now, if you're, married, you have kids, you have a mortgage, then it's going to be a different set of, variables to reach,
Right.
your calculus, if you will. So figuring out, being honest with yourself about what you want, where you are in your life. Like, I'm not, as much as I think people expect me to be, I'm not a burn the ships at the shore guy. So
Yeah.
I don't want that extra level of stress in my life. So for me, it's way more interesting to figure out, how do I do this nights and weekends to prove that there's really product market fit? Because that's a huge question, right? You don't know. And buying yourself the time where you're not panicking, I think is really big. And
Meaning, like, short-term doing something that may not be the most purposeful or meaningful, but might make you money and build you skills so that you can get to a place where you have leverage to pursue the passion or skills, right?
yes, skills are all that matter. So ultimately, this is a question of, are you able to do the thing you actually want to do? But getting those skills will take time. And so the question becomes, are you putting yourself in a position where you're going to have the time that you need to learn the things you need to learn? Or have you put yourself in a position where you have to think short term because you're running out of money and you have this huge sort of stress burden on your life? And so I see otherwise capable people that if they gave themselves a longer timeline,
Bingo,
they
yeah.
could figure this out, but they've shortened their timeline so much because it's, maybe it's not cool to do it nights and weekends. Maybe they hate their job so much. They like the energy of, like,
Right.
burn it down and I'm just going to go, attack the city. And I get it. And there can be a lot of juice there. And there are amazing stories of people that do that. It does not fit my personality or the way that I like to move through the world. But that's where we get into, as you think through these things, like, you have to get down to the nature of things. So I'm not optimizing for the average human. I'm optimizing for me. I'm optimizing for my life and the way that I think. So that is, rather than the thing, that's the nature of the thing. So when you're trying to select from a universe of ideas, it's like you really have to filter it through what makes sense for you as an individual, as well as just sort of best practice.
How important is doing things that give you energy versus burn energy in terms of the litmus test in business as a North Star? Because a common denominator that I've realized, and even I used to intern for Rob Dyrdek, and I know you connected with Rob as well. Rob talks about that he's big on optimizing and simplifying his life and his decisions. And one thing he talks about is, at its core, his North Star is always something that gives him energy, because when it gives you energy, kind of like you mentioned, when there's chaos, when you give it energy, it gives you this boost to get through the hard times and the obstacles. Whereas, for example, like, you might work harder, quote unquote, and deeper at something that is way more stressful, way longer time horizon, but it's worth it, versus something that's half as stressful, but that's twice as toxic on your body and your being. So how important is gauging doing things that energize you versus drop your energy? What do you do to calibrate that? Is it meditation? What do you do to build your relationship with yourself and understand, especially as a leader of something as awesome as Impact Theory? You have a team, you obviously have a lot of money and time behind it, and you're inventing it. It doesn't exist. You're sort of paving a path in this new era with social. How do you find where your energy is and calibrate and guide the ship? Where do you derive your sort of direction and energy and alignment from with this stuff?
So the first part of that, I think that people should absolutely look at, what is it that gives you more energy? Because, it's a game of attrition. You're playing a very long time horizon. You're going to fail a lot. There's going to be a lot of, like, having to figure things out and making mistakes. And a lot of that aversion energy is going to come in as you struggle with this or whatever. And so if the thing itself isn't replenishing a large amount of that energy, then you're really going to be in trouble.
Yes.
So the doing should be joyful. And so I think the right question for people to ask isn't what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? It's what would I do and love every day, even if I were failing? And so when you think about what you could enjoy failing at, now you're on a much more interesting path, right? Because, okay, I can be in here, I can fight this fight, I can struggle with this thing. And over time, obviously, I'm hoping that I figure it out and I win big and all of that. But if I don't, it isn't like, because this is what was going on in the first company, Awareness Technologies. It was, I knew that I was sort of burning my fuse and that I was just banking that I could get rich faster than that fuse would run out.
Right.
And I lost, and the fuse ran out before I got rich. And so thank God, because in that, the rest of my life hinged and everything turned on that. And you said, you know, each company has become more and more meaningful because of that moment, because I knew that, you know, one, tomorrow's not guaranteed to any of us. Quite frankly, tonight's not guaranteed to any of us. And once you know, okay, I'm on borrowed time and I don't know that I'll ever be successful. So that, you know, if you have a fuse, the odds of it running out are much higher than you finding success. So you have to figure out what is that thing that I can do and keep doing and struggle and fight, because life has a certain amount of that no matter what you do. And going back to that, you have evolutionary pressure to work hard. So if you know you're going to have to struggle at something, then you should very much struggle at something that gives you energy. Now, what is it that I focus on and think about that gives me the energy to keep doing all of this? It's, I have a very simple mission. It's simple to articulate. How about that? To pull off is going to be, you know, very, very difficult. But the simple idea is that right now, in much of the developed world, your zip code is the #1 predictor of your future success. And so, while I'm not a huge fan of thinking that IQ is a big factor in people's success, of course it is. So if the answer were that your IQ were the #1 predictor of your future success, okay, I could begrudgingly accept that and it never would have become the mission in my life. But seeing amazing people who I love and care about get chewed up by the inner cities was something that I wasn't prepared to just accept and live with. So at first, I thought that I could just gather people around and say, hey, I took myself from, you know, really struggling emotionally, not knowing how to succeed in business, to being very successful. It's ideas, it isn't me. There was nothing like different about me. I met minimum requirements, right? So there is a level of intellect that you will need. I meet minimum requirements. Anybody listening to this meets minimum requirements. So now I thought, okay, I could just gather people around and explain the ideas. They would be able to go off and implement them, and it would change their life forever. What I found was 2%, that's true. 2% changes their life. It's absolutely incredible. I still get phone calls and text messages from people from years ago that now are like reaping the rewards of the ideas that I shared with them back then. And that's amazing, but I'm a scale guy. So I'm more interested in the 98%. So I was like, well, what about them? No bullshit, what would it take to make sure that the 98% of people for whom you can't just give the instruction manual and they will be interested or they will do anything with it? And the answer was that, or my hypothesis is, which is why we're called impact theory and not impact fact, but my theory on how to impact people at scale, and I do think this is right, is you have to focus on the age of imprinting, which is 11 to 15. I don't love that, you know, development cycles matter, but they do. We're easier to influence when we're younger than we are when we're older. And so
is that the inspiration for the comic books?
That is absolutely the idea behind that. Storytelling in general.
Right.
And then, so that age, and then you need to hit them emotionally. So getting out of think like this, act like this, which is what I do on that side of our business, right? What we're doing right now is think like this, act like this. Impact Theory University is think like this, act like this. But the majority of our time and attention is actually on the storytelling side. So the NFTs, the comic books, the film and TV. So that's where we have the majority of our time and energy, because it hits people on an emotional level. It plants seeds of empowerment and a growth mindset, but it's wrapped in story, so people are just entertained. But hiding in that entertainment, in the same way that Star Wars gave me Yoda, Yoda led me to Taoism, and Taoism changed my life, right? So it's like we want to have that kind of stair step. We tell you a story, gives you ideas, characters that you can latch onto, but then we also, hopefully, graduate some percentage into, you know, this kind of content or Impact Theory University, where people can go, oh my God, I see now this idea that this character struggled with in the theme of the story. You're literally telling me how to apply it in my own life. And so, you know, our hope is that we can get people through that. And that is the idea of fighting for the people that I met and love that really struggled with this and their kids is so meaningful to me that when things suck, I just come back to, but do I still believe that this is possible?
Yeah.
And if I still believe that this is possible, then it's like you can take that warrior mentality, right? Of like fucking you pound the shield and you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna be the person that isn't afraid to make mistakes, that isn't afraid to take risks, that isn't afraid to try. And then you just keep going. And it really is, and you just keep going. So it isn't that it's up and to the right. It isn't that it's all smiles. It's fucking hard, but you have to keep going.
I love that, Tom, because it really illustrates the power of the time horizon. And, you know, one interesting thing, you hear this with Bezos, and I've seen this with a lot of people I interview, and the pattern is obvious, is, you know, people that build, like you mentioned, scale, people that build big things that reach a lot of people, they think in terms of decades. People who, you know, on a smaller scale, they think in terms of a couple years. And, you know, like it's almost like as you go up the quote unquote income, for lack of a better metric, as you go up the income scale, people play on longer time horizons. And as you get smaller and smaller, it comes down literally from decades to years to months to hourly rates. And the quote unquote lowest paid people are people that are paid on an hourly rate. And the people that make the biggest impact are usually thinking in terms of the decade. So the hour to decade time horizon. So I love that you mentioned that sometimes the stress that's being created is because of your self-imposed, you know, especially I'm, you know, 29. There's a lot of people who, oh, I want to make it in my 20s. I want to make it in my 30s, right? So that they can flex or whatever the motive is. They have that. But I love that you mentioned by extending the time horizon, you open up a whole new world of possibilities to really develop and earn the sort of scale and impact that a lot of people crave. I want to ask, what's been the hardest part for you about building the Impact Theory vision on a personal level? Because you got team, you know, you got a lot of stuff. What's been the most challenging part?
Time management. So there are so many things that I want to do, and I am frustrated. I think everybody is, but I may actually be frustrated more than most people. There's just something in the way that I think about the world. It really bothers me that I can do anything I want, but not everything.
Yes.
And I'm probably very fortunate and should just count my lucky stars. And here we are back at Frame of Reference, that I find it very easy to be passionate about something, to really like, I've explained to people a million times how you increase desire in your life, and it works on me so well. So there are people, for instance, they can go into the gym and they work out, and it's, you know, much easier. I won't say it's easy, but it's easier for them to put on muscle, right? And so you look at, or even, I mean, not to cast aspersions, but like in the bodybuilding world, part of what makes people successful at the highest level is how well do you respond to steroids, right? And some people respond to steroids better, and then some people respond to lifting better. And so when you get somebody that responds to lifting above average and steroids above average, now you get somebody that can really do damage. And that may be, I may be a hyper responder to that loop of creating desire. But the problem, the downside of that is I've fallen in love with so many things that I could dedicate just obscene amounts of time to. And so it really becomes bothersome to me that I don't get to experience all those things myself. I have to staff out and have those people. And look, of course there's an upside. I get amazing people around me that get to do like this stuff with me and get to be part of the team. But that really is, like, I'll give you a very concrete example. I'm not going to get to write the story of Mary Mods because when I think about how I need to allocate my time, I can find other amazingly talented writers, more talented than I am, if I'm completely honest, and I can bring them in to do that thing. Whereas it will be much harder to replace me as the CEO. So, but I'm really sad about that. I really like spending that kind of time on the creative. That I think will always be the most difficult thing for me, is that I am limited in the amount of time I can apply to things.
Hey guys, we'll get back to this video in a sec, but I just wanted to let you know that our brand new Passionate Few coaching program for people who are looking to take their brand and business to the next level by creating powerful videos on YouTube and using organic video to grow is now available. All you got to do if you're interested is check out the link in the description below where we have a link to our Facebook group, which you can answer a couple questions and join. It's 100% free, and you can learn all of the behind-the-scenes strategies that 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs, experts, and thought leaders are using on YouTube to build their brands the easy way, not the complex way. So anyways, just wanted to let you know that. And if you'd like to learn more about our team working with you to help you build your business, you can actually book a call in the description below now with our team to see how we can help be a great fit to help you build your brand or business, if it makes sense. So anyways, just want to let you know that. You can check those links down in the description below. But with no further ado, let's get back to the video. What about in terms of the interviews? What's been the most joyous part about, I know the mission of originally doing Impact Theory, and before that, you guys had Insight Quest, been a fan for a long time. And I know you talk about the mission is maximizing human potential. What's been the most surprising part, and how many interviews have you done at this stage? It's got to be in the hundreds or thousands.
It's definitely hundreds. I don't know.
Yeah.
And this is, I think this kind of bothers
be
people
over
about me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I'm always looking forward so much that I do tend to lose sight of the present, which is actually something, like if you were to ask me advice, I would tell you, be careful of that. Don't do that. You can't just live in the future.
Right.
But if I'm honest about a weakness of mine, it's that.
That.
So, and then there was another part to that question, remind me.
I was saying, like, what was the mission originally? Because I know you mentioned maximizing human potential was part of the mission. And what's been the most surprising part about everything you've learned? Because I'm sure you went into it with preconceived notions about maybe answers they would say, and then little, surprises here, surprises there. I'm sure it's widened your perspective.
By the time I started doing the interviews, I was already so deep in the world that people have given me extremely powerful examples of ideas. But ultimately, I don't think any of us in this space are presenting new ideas. We're just saying what is true about the human condition in a new way, right? So if you go look at the Stoics, it's like they already nailed it 2,000 years ago, right? But I can't read the Stoics, but I can read Ryan Holiday, right? Because he's taken those ideas and he's given it to me in a way where I'm like, oh man, I get that. So basically everyone I've ever had on the show has given me some piece of advice, a new way to look at it. The science people are the ones that have given me the stuff where I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. Like those have been sort of the big mind-blowing ones. People like Goggins have given me examples where, like the cookie jar, right? The idea of, hey, taking my wins and putting it in the cookie jar. So in the moment where I'm fucking just getting mauled, I can pull a cookie out and remind myself, this is you, motherfucker. And like, that's super meaningful. So maybe less surprises and more like, oh my God, that context is so incredible and so useful. That tool is so amazing. I'm so glad that I have that now. Yeah. And the original mission was, I wouldn't have articulated it at the very beginning. What I was saying at the beginning was to pull people out of the matrix.
Right.
But what I meant by that was to give them a growth mindset. So growth mindset is the reason that we founded the company. Originally, it was we were going to do stories and business, and we were going to do business acceleration. And that has morphed into business decision making. Instead of me going in and doing these one by one, helping to accelerate companies, stepping back and giving people how to think from first principles. But yeah, all the same ideas, but you change the context, you change the product, if you will, you change the way that you're putting it out there. But the idea, the North Star is the same.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned you guys have that program, the decision-making workshop, and it's something that you've been really passionate about helping people with. I'm curious, because this is in alignment with me, is, for me, I'm super passionate about helping people get unstuck. It's why I started the show years ago. It's why when I was stuck years ago, before I ever dreamed, I used to watch all your stuff. It's a dream that I'm here in your room doing this for the third time. Is I'm really passionate about helping people get unstuck, and I know it's something you are too. And the way they get out of any kind of quote-unquote stuck position is through a decision, and decisions that can take you in one trajectory or the other. In your experience of helping, and hearing questions, I'm sure at this stage from thousands of people around the world, fans of the show, fans of what you've built in business, What are some of the most common denominators in terms of problems or areas people struggle with when it comes to making decisions? Is it the overwhelm? Is it the bombardment? Is it the saturation of information? I mean, what are the common denominators you see that are problematic for people to make decisions that move them forward?
They are universally afraid. So they're afraid of making the wrong decision, basically. So
at every level, you see this pattern.
Yeah, everybody is standing in a room with 1,000 doors, and your job is to close 999 of them. And so people are really afraid to close a door because what if that was the right door? They're also afraid to walk through the door because what if I'm embarrassed on the other side of that? And if you can't think in long time horizons, like I've embarrassed my way to success, right? So I've just, but really, and when I didn't have the mental model to deal with it when I first started out, and so I developed like a massive amount of anxiety because I was just failing all the time, and I was embarrassing myself all the time, and people wanted to know, you know, at first it's funny now because I'm getting older, but when I first started in business, it was like, who's the kid? Why the fuck is he here, right? And so it was just, I was so behind what everybody else knew about business. And it was and I remember the guys who ended up becoming my partners in Quest back at Awareness Technologies had made the same pitch to God knows how many people. We're not looking for employees. We're looking for partners. We settle for employees. And if you can make yourself valuable enough to the company, then you can actually get a piece of it. And I remember looking around being like, I don't see other people like involving themselves as much as I was. And to give you a sense of like how hardcore I went, when my wife and I moved, we moved to be closer to my two who would become my partners. At the time were just my employers. And I wanted to be so close to them that we were never more than 7 minutes away, and that if they called me at 2 in the morning, that I could get to either of their houses in 7 minutes. So my wife and I would go look at an apartment. Remember, I'm just an employee. We would go look at an apartment.
How old are you at this stage?
25.
Okay.
So we'd go look, 26. We'd go look at an apartment, and if it were something that Lisa liked, then we would time it. And we would drive to one partner, yep, go back, drive to the next, yep, we got it in under 7 minutes to both.
Yeah.
And like, that was me when I was just an employee, just trying to stay close to the fire, trying to learn, but I was in over my head all the time. And so figuring that stuff out and not having the mechanisms to deal with it ended up where I was getting really high quality skills, but like just really getting anxious all the time. Because I'm like, fuck, am I going to be able to figure this out? And so that's where I came up with this idea of there's only one belief that matters. And the belief that matters is that you can get better. And so once you believe that, and I've just shown it to myself over and over and over and over and over and over and over in my life, so I know I may go into something not knowing how to do it, but I can figure it out. I'll be willing to take my lumps, to fail, to look, stare nakedly at my inadequacies, as I like to say, learn, try again, and just keep going. And then on a long enough timeline, I win. But when people are looking at me in the short term, you might catch me in the middle of me falling flat on my face. And if in the middle of that, you're like, this guy's a fucking bozo, and you move on, you're going to be one of the people that looks back and goes, what the fuck just happened? Like, where did he come from that seems like out of nowhere? Like one of my own cousins, who of course knew me very well when I was younger, lost track of me for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, something like that. Recently had a conversation with my mom, and my mom told her, you know, what I had built, and she was like, what? She just, her mental model was me, you know, in my 20s. And so she could not fathom that I had acquired skills enough to go on to build multiple successful companies. Like that was because in a short time horizon, anybody, like you could look at Elon Musk in a short time horizon and think this guy's, you know, gonna fail. But oh my God, like on a long timeline, the guy is monstrous. And I think, while I don't think I will ever be able to output like Elon Musk, I'm just being honest, I think all of us can become what I call a fast pig, right? So you can't make a racehorse out of a pig, but you can make a really fast pig. And that, my life is not the answer to the question, what does a racehorse look like? That to me is an Elon Musk. But my life is the answer to the question, what does a fast pig look like?
And what about in terms of, you mentioned something earlier that I kind of want to fuse with that. You mentioned that you're a scale guy, meaning like you could have something purposeful or meaningful, but if you feel like even though it would energize you, it has, you know, a limited utility, audience, product market fit, right? Whatever the sort of variable is, that you'll always want to think bigger. Do you recommend people go for, like, for sort of getting W's that they see in front of them and then trusting that the next step will reveal itself? Obviously, at this stage, you've kind of stretched probably beyond what you thought possible at one time, and then stretched that possibility, attained it, and now it's like bigger, bigger, bigger impact. Do you think people need to earn that with themselves? You mentioned, you know, before we started rolling that there's that progress happens in 15-minute increments, so to speak.
Quite what I said.
Dang it.
What I said was
Yes.
you have to figure out what to do with your next 15 minutes. Because you were saying people, they have such a big vision that they feel stuck. And I was like, yeah, you have to get the goal. Like you have to understand what you're trying to do so well, you know what to do with the next 15 minutes. And that is when you have enough clarity to know the most meaningful use of the next 15 minutes, you know, to step towards your goal, you've got enough clarity. If you don't know what to do with the next 15 minutes, it's a clarity problem.
For you, have you ever had the issue of a product market fit problem?
Of course.
And how did you mitigate that? How did you, because I think a lot of people listening, and that's why I'm trying to like channel them, because I know what it's like, and also I'm one of them, right? Like is, and I'm sure all of us are at every level, it's like you're trying to constantly get better and better and iterate that. When do you decide to like kill something, even if it's passionate or purposeful or meaningful, and go, you know, like how do you know when to iterate the goal versus the processes to the goal, right? Because it's an elegant dance, right? I know it's obviously an open-ended question, but any framework to deal with that?
I should probably start being really careful about using the words mission and goal. So my mission when I was at Quest was to end metabolic disease. And then we had a whole bunch of goals that we would have to do, you know, launch the bar, get profitable, find the equipment that we were going to need to produce this, learn social media, like, you know, all that stuff.
Custom built the machine. I remember the story.
Exactly, exactly. So those were the goals, but the mission was to end metabolic disease. And so the mission guides a lot of your decision making. So then I go to impact theory. Mission becomes to make sure that nobody reaches the age of 15 without encountering a growth mindset through story at scale. So, okay, cool. So now I know what I'm doing, different mission. So I've only, you know, once in my professional life, because I didn't have, well, mission 1, get rich, terrible mission. Never going to repeat that mistake. Mission 2, end metabolic disease. Thought that that was going to be the forever company, was going to bring the studio into Quest and use storytelling to really end metabolic disease, right? So that ends up not being the case. We end up selling the company. So then it's like, okay, I need a new mission. I go through the process of re-anchoring, building desire, right? I was talking about that. So I re-anchor around this desire to make sure that nobody makes it to the age of 15 without encountering a growth mindset. And like I build that flame until it's, you know, this really big thing. So my missions change very infrequently.
Sure.
The goals are just like the best guess, right? So here is my goal. Like right now, Impact Theory as a company has 5 goals. Every company should have 3 to 5 goals, no more, no less. They should have dates, how much, and what exactly it is. And then we, weekly, as a whole company, we all get together and we talk about those 5 goals. And every individual should also have 3 to 5 goals. Every department should have 3 to 5 goals. And an individual should understand how their goal feeds into the department, feeds into the company. So the goals, like once we realize, nope, that's no longer the most meaningful way, we will scrap it. So an individual might scrap 1 or 2 goals every month. A department might scrap 1 or 2 goals every quarter. A company might scrap 1 or 2 goals every year. So that's sort of the range. If you're going through them more frequently than that, then you might have a problem. Now, of grit. When we talk about the physics of progress, and here's my goal, but I'm running a test to see if this is the most effective way to reach my goal, you might do, I mean, most of them take time, but there's no reason why you couldn't burn through 100 tests. Like we do tests on thumbnails all day long. We might do 20 tests in a single day.
On YouTube thumbnails to measure performance.
Exactly. So you've got mission, changes very rarely. Goals change more frequently, but they're really just a path to your mission anyway. Then you've got tests, which there's no sort of grit lost. You want to get test data as fast as you can. You couldn't do enough of those. As long as you're getting clean data, there is no such thing as doing too many of those. It only becomes too many when you can no longer assimilate the learning.
And I love that you say it's about the mission primarily, because then money is a byproduct of it. You're also flexible to change and iterate the goals or the formula or the product market fit, because the mission can remain constant. So you make the sort of mission of what you're doing the nucleus, then everything else, for lack of a better expression, is either a variable or a test in the achievement or in the pursuit of that. So you have found that that model has allowed more to flow than per se like, okay, XYZ, we got to get to X revenue, right? That kind of thing from the prior with the, what was it called, technologies?
Awareness technology.
Awareness technology.
Yeah, you have to be business savvy. That's the one sort of bad thing about all this is like being a good person.
Or good thing, yeah.
It would make my teachings far more spiritually complete if all you had to do was figure out the mental side of your own life, right? Then if that's all it took to grow a business is wanting to do rad things for people, it would be amazing. Because that's where I attract entrepreneurs that are like, I want to help. I want to do great things. I want to impact people, right? And I'm always like, oh my God, it's amazing. Here's the bad news. You also have to learn finance, and you also have to learn organizational structures, and you also have to like understand HR compliance. Like there's going to be a whole fucking side of this universe that is not, for me anyway, not fun, but it's a must. And this is where I got obsessed with the idea of skills is like, you can't just know what you want to do. You also actually have to be able to get there. Like, for instance, I slid in, you're standing in a room with 1,000 doors and your job is to close 999 of them. But figuring out which doors to close is an art. You have to fucking figure it out. And if you don't, you're going to lose. And that sucks. I don't like that. I don't like that some people just will not be good at knowing which door to close. And even though you can close it, open it back up and go through it, I know some people are going to sketch out. And they're going to take 15 doors. And they're just, like in and out, back and forth, trying, oh God. And to help them, I would have to say, you just have to pick a path and go. But the next person, I'd be like, hey, you've overcommitted to this door. You need to recognize when it's time to come back. And it's like, I can't be there for everybody, right? And first of all, I'm not going to be making the right decision for them 100% of the time either. So it's like, all I can ever hope to do is arm people with first principles. Let them get in and figure out how to like navigate this. I'm doing the same thing, right? Like if first principles gave you the perfect answer every time, then it's like everybody would be equally successful all the time. And it just isn't, right? So all of that complexity of like the art and the intellect and it matters and fucking how smart you are like plays out in your life. Oh God. Like there's so many things. Like I don't think it's a mistake that Elon Musk is the richest person alive, right? Like he's an engineer. And an engineer the likes of which I think history will look back on. Like when they're contemporary, nobody will ever give them the credit that they deserve. And maybe I'm a moron. I don't think so. Like I think history is going to remember this guy in the pantheon of your Nikola Teslas and your Einsteins and like people that fucking shook the earth. Like it's crazy the number of high-level technologies he's in. And just like kicking off, you
simultaneously, while doing it all.
It's insane, man. It's really, really insane.
Have you guys tried getting him on the show? I'm sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
His schedule, I imagine, is a little busy.
We either get kind declines. I can't remember. It's always either check back in a year, or it's like kindly, but unfortunately we can't. So we keep getting those.
So when it comes to that reference, and we'll cap it up here because I think this is a beautiful place to, is you mentioned that there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution. And Warren Buffett talks about this concept. He said, being a great investor is about seeing 1,000 opportunities to invest, 999 of them which are great, only one of which is going to be excellent long term. What's the practical advice? I know you said everybody's different, but how much of it is literally just trial and error? And I love that you said embarrass your way to success, because it demystifies this impression that you have to fully know. Like sometimes you'll pull a trigger and be like, yeah, let's launch it. I'm not sure, but fuck it, it's my best guess based on all my research. How much of success, quote unquote, is that versus like, no, this is what it is and it pans out?
It's the nature of skill set. You must acquire skills. So
based on actions of your best guesses in the moment.
Yes, sort of. So let's talk Kobe Bryant. The most talented athletes in the world were paid millions of dollars to stop him from scoring every night. And yet, he scored 81 points in a single game. What that makes clear to me is a quote from Kobe Bryant, which is, "Boos don't block dunks." It does not matter how badly people want to see you fail. It doesn't matter if they hate you. It doesn't matter if the deck is stacked against you. It only matters if you can outperform people. And so how you get to outperforming them, there are 1,000 different paths, right? There's no one path to heaven, as they say. Now, what path you end up taking is going to be unique for everybody. And for all of us, there's going to be luck, right? I'm so lucky that the guys that ended up becoming my partners at Quest first saw me randomly speaking, and they were like, whoa, this kid is kind of sharp. Like, why don't we see if he wants to come on board? And then, very lucky that they were like, hey, we want partners, not employees. And very lucky that they were very hardcore. And the lesson I had to learn was to toughen up. So it was like all these things that I particularly needed. And even though there were a lot of us at Awareness Technologies, I'm the one that's gone on to do other things. And that is partly luck. So had I not met them, luck. Had they not have been somehow the exactly what I needed. So that like tough love, that really hard environment, like fucking get it done, don't come with excuses. Like I needed that. And so that has yielded all this tremendous stuff in my life. So it's this incredibly complex thing. But what ultimately matters is skill set. Skill set. I took the time, the unending decades of work to get better and to stare nakedly at my inadequacies, admit when I sucked at something, and say, I have to get better at this, or I have to hire, right? So however people end up getting the skills, they have to get the skills. And that's the final question is, will you do what is required to get the skills?
I love that, Tom. Thank you so much for sitting down with us for this round 3. Before we wrap up, we always play one little game at the end. It's called First Things First. And the way the game works is I just rifle off a quick word or phrase. You just tell me the first word or phrase that comes to mind, like a relation game.
Yep.
And then we'll wrap it up. So number 1 is the vision for impact theory in 10, 20 years down into the future.
Oh, we're building the next Disney.
Number 2, limiting beliefs.
The only limiting belief I have, I think, in my life is that I couldn't do what I'm doing now and have children.
3, what to do when you're stuck. What's your rule of thumb? Anytime there's so much going on.
Take action, even if it's wrong.
4, fear.
My fear?
Fear in general, the word fear. What is
Brain damage, losing my wife.
Decision making.
You must.
Best decision you ever made.
Marrying Lisa.
I love that. Shout out Lisa Bilyeu. She's awesome.
Facts. And I should have said proposing to Lisa, because that was the thing I debated.
I remember the story, the lipstick and the whole thing. Your guys' whole love story is awesome.
Yeah. Wow.
I remember
Good
that
memory. Yes.
Money.
Powerful.
Passion.
The first word that came to mind was few, because of the name of this show.
Hey.
What do I really think about passion? It's critical.
Your advice to the young Tom Bilyeu who was looking for answers and hungry and overwhelmed and on this vicious pursuit that so many men and women around the world might be on now, looking for answers, trying to gather, piece here, piece there, put it together, stack. Being on this side of the fence, what would you say to that young Tom in parallel with people around the world?
Yeah, there's only one thing that people need to know. It's what I call the only belief that matters. We talked about it earlier. That is, if you put time and attention into getting better at something, you will actually get better.
And the last one is, when you're dead, gone, and nothing but a pile of dust, what do you hope that Tom Bilyeu's life and mission was all about for the world?
I didn't used to think a lot about legacy, but I'm starting to now. And that is, I really want people to understand that they can get good at something that matters to them and elevates those around them. And my God, if somebody goes on to be insanely successful and touches a lot of lives and says, this is because something that Tom said, that would be incredible. I think of myself as the soil. Now, I also want to be an item in the garden, but I really think of myself as the soil. And I hope that people that encounter the ideas, because it isn't me, it's the ideas. If they encounter the ideas that allow them to grow and they go on to create something amazing, dude, that's my plan B. So my plan A is to build the next Disney and hope that transforms lives by planting these seeds, opening conversations between parents and kids about what empowerment is and going on the hero's journey in your own life. But plan B is that somebody encounters these ideas that I've said into a camera and they go do something extraordinary.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be on.
Make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below if you want any questions for Tom. Make sure to follow Impact Theory as well. Until next time, live strong, live with passion, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. And don't forget, like Tom says, go out there and outwork everyone. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video here on the channel. And also, I wanted to let you know that if you'd like to learn even more about how to grow your brand or business on YouTube from some of the tips and strategies you may hear here and there on these calls, you can check out the link in the description below to join our 100% free Facebook group, where you can learn all of the 6, 7, and 8-figure strategies that experts around the world are using to grow their brand, influence, and business using YouTube. The simple way, not the complex way with organic video. Also, if you'd like to work with our team and you're like, you know what, I want to find out more, you can click the link below, book a call, and see how we can help you grow your brand and business on YouTube. The easy way, not the complex way. All right, guys, that's it. With no further ado, again, make sure to like, subscribe, listen to a future video. Until then, live strong, live with passion. See you in the next video.